Thank you guys for coming. I would like to introduce Miss Mary, and she is with the Potomac Conservancy, and was trying to think of how long ago that we met. We, from Board of Outreach and Social Justice, about 6 or 7 years ago, some time ago, we wanted to do something for Earth Day. And Josh had researched, and he found that the Potomac Conservancy was cleaning up Jones Point Park. And we were invited, so we went down there, and I immediately fell in love with them because, among other things, they limited the amount of volunteers to 100, which may not be important to a lot of folks, but that told me immediately that they valued the volunteers. If you've ever been to one where you've got 1,000 people and 82 jobs, and and people trip over ladders and stuff like that, they felt immediately that our time was worthwhile. That was my first experience with them. I'll tell you 2 more that I thought were really funny. One was at Arlington National Cemetery. We were invited to Arlington National Cemetery to pick up the mainly acorns, because of the value of oaks, and we found some persimmons that day as well. This was in 2019, the point of it was to take them up in May, way up further, the Potomac in Frederick, Maryland, because if you can establish the banks of the river up there, that it didn't happen, but our intentions were honorable. So we're at Arlington National Cemetery. My husband, who's a master teacher, me, his son, who has a PhD from Columbia, his daughter-in-law, who has is a PA out of Yale, and our granddaughter, who was an honors student at University of Maryland, doing something that squirrels could do, and probably do a better job. Who but Mary could have talked me into doing something like that? And I think those seeds were stored, and hopefully we'll be able to, they are future trees. And the more we know now, the more we know the value of oak, very specifically the oak trees. And the third thing I remember that was valuable to me, do you guys know where on the Potomac there's the fall line? Have you ever been right on the fall line? So Great Falls is, pretty impressive. And then, but down when you're in Washington itself, that's pretty placid. When the Potomac, just kind of goes out to the bay. But if you stand on, it's 3300 M Street, very close to the Key Bridge, it's really impressive, where you can see, here's very tumbly water, and it just smooths out. So there are things that I continue to learn through the Potomac Conservancy, and I hope you guys do too, because Mary always brings a good perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I am mic'd up. Much, Nancy. Can you hear me? Great. I can let you know before I begin that you absolutely did a better job than the squirrels would have done. Squirrels don't bag their acorns by type and source location, and they don't get them into the truck with the forestry department, and they certainly don't help the forestry department get them going into seedlings. So squirrels do what they do for their own needs, but you help the humans help the nature. So thank you. Yes, I'm Mary with Potomac Conservancy. We're a nonprofit organization. We've had the very good fortune to have this community support our work, both physically, hands, financially over a number of years, and just by spreading the word that clean water is important. And Potomac Conservancy, we're a small nonprofit. We're based here in the region, office actually in Silver Spring, Maryland. We have about 12 people on staff. We're a small operation, but we are mighty, working through partnerships and volunteers. Our whole mission is about protecting the water in the Potomac River. We believe that healthy, sustainable, and vibrant communities really have to start with clean water. You can't do that without a clean water source you can be comfortable with. And our founding was about 30 years ago. We are a land trust, first and foremost. We've protected about 16,000 acres in the upper watershed. That land's protected forever, which means whatever's happening on that land will create clean water to come to all of us here downstream. We're also an advocate. So we get vocal, and we, most importantly, ask our community to get vocal, because an active, insistent community is the most constructive way to make long-term change. So we have about 30,000 people that we're connected with in one way or another. You're all part of that crowd. And we ask them to turn their voices towards the local jurisdictions that are making decisions every day that affect our water quality. Just to get hierarchical and political for a second, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, super important, lays down the rules. This is the line you must not cross. That's fantastic. They have to do that. But it's the county or the city or the water department or your town council that actually makes the decision about whether or not this policy will take place, or that law, or this investment in rain gardens on the boulevard. Those decisions are being made every day. And thankfully, those people are really responsive to folks raising their hand and saying, I believe in clean water. I think we should go this way with that investment. I think we should go this way with that policy. Those decisions cumulatively make an enormous impact on the quality of our water. And that, again, is what we're focused on. So the last thing that Potomac Conservancy does in our trio of things, we're a land trust, protecting land forever. We're an advocate, helping people raise their voices and point that force at the decisions that are being made every day. And then we're a community conservation force, and this is where your volunteering has been experienced. We meet people by doing good work with them on the ground with their own hands. We host about 1,000 volunteers a year, and I'm quoting that from a normal year. This past year was, thankfully, again, a normal year. We host about 1,000 volunteers a year in riverside cleanups. We remove about 20,000 pounds of trash in a standard year. More so now. The dynamics of trash in our waterways is mysterious and troubling. We also we get trees on their way to being planted. The Acorn Expedition Nancy was referring to is a program called Tomorrow's Trees. We all know trees are good for water, right? You're sitting in the middle of a beautiful 7-ish acre certified forest. It's gorgeous, and it's doing wonderful things for the wildlife and all of the water that has the good fortune to land on this 7 acres. There are a lot of places that don't have enough trees. In the Chesapeake Bay watershed, we are losing, what is my term here? About 100 acres a day of forest. Now people are planting trees too, which is great, but it doesn't hold a candle to how much we're losing. So this is the wrong trajectory. Potomac Conservancy felt very strongly that if you're going to protect water, you have to protect land. That's where the water comes from. And if we're losing too many trees, this is an unsustainable path. We can't continue to do that and still think that our waters will be protected in 50 or 100 years. So we look deeply into how do our forests do, especially those forests alongside streams. Your stream, beautiful, happy water. It's only really going to be happy if it has about 50 feet of trees or shrubs or something green on either side of it. Those are the corridors we most need to protect. And where they've been diminished, those are the corridors that most need to be re-treed. We need to bring healthy trees back into those corridors so we can protect our waterways. And so we've been working with the state of Virginia for a good many years, the Department of Forestry in particular, to collect acorns, send them off to the nursery, and they're grown into trees, and then those trees at about 3 years are available to plant out again. That's been wonderful. We did that for 18 years, but all of a sudden we realized this is not enough. This is never going to be enough. The state of Maryland last year just passed a law and a commitment to plant 5 million trees in 10 years. It's outstanding. We fought really hard for that. And everyone who's contributed their voice to Potomac Conservancy's work has been a part of that fight. The state of Maryland, 5 million trees commitment over 10 years. Certain percentage committed to underserved urban communities that frankly just never had enough trees. That's great. But in the workroom, behind those big decisions, behind those votes, when the agency sits down and says, okay, how do we do that? And they realize, we don't have enough tree stock. Our nurseries don't actually have enough capacity to start 5 million trees, let alone find the acorns. I'm using acorns for a whole grab bag of native tree seeds. Where do we get these trees? This is a fantastic idea, but if the source doesn't work. So Potomac Conservancy and about 5 of our close organization partners went into plan mode. And we thought, you know, planting a tree is great, but we need to solve the supply problem. There's a supply chain problem with trees. And you think, oh, they grow everywhere. What's the problem? But if you're going to grow a little oak tree that is strong enough, sufficient enough to be transplanted out to a restoration project, you're going to have to, that's a lot of work. You need to know that it's going to be ready in 3 years. So with a collection of other nonprofits we work very closely with, we decided to tackle the supply problem. So Potomac Conservancy going forward will not be planting trees. We will be on the collecting acorns, persimmon, walnut side of this. All of this is in precursor to starting our little show. Oop. Okay. I'm standing too close and I don't know how to forward. Okay. Okay, then I'm just going to do this. So why protect the Potomac River? I brought you into a little story about some of the guts of how and why we do what we do with the local decision makers, with the going to the source with tree seeds. But why? We've all experienced the river as a beautiful place to be, as a beautiful place to find peace and solace, for recreation, for fishing. It's also the drinking water for over 5 million people. We're drinking Potomac River water. We need it to be clean. So as I said, we're saving healthy lands through protecting land forever with easements. We're an advocacy group and we're a community conservation group. This is the Potomac River watershed. And we are the little diamond of DC there in the curve of the river. We all find ourselves there. We're in the lower third of the water. By the time it gets to us, the jig is pretty much up. It needs to be clean upriver. Now, with 5 to 6 million people in this region, we're a tremendous force for either good action or bad action for water. And so we try to tackle the water problems that come with a large number of people. Next. Here's the Potomac River watershed within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We're all part of the Chesapeake Bay. The Potomac River delivers only 25% of the water into the Chesapeake Bay, but we are the lion's share of the people in the Chesapeake Bay region. So people have big impacts on our nature, for good or bad. And that 25% that we can deliver into the bay, of course, it needs to be cleaner. Next. The Potomac River up in the upper watershed, beautiful agricultural and forested landscapes. There's a vibrant agricultural economy going on in the upper reaches of the watershed. Maryland, huge amount of Virginia, huge amount of West Virginia, tiny bit of Pennsylvania. If those lands are managed well, clean water comes into the river. That's really important, but they need to be managed well. We're working with many private landowners and farmers who do that, and forest owners who do that, and we're trying to work with the others who need help to do that. Next. They're at Harpers Ferry, one of our iconic moments where the Shenandoah and the Potomac come together. And next. in our little neck of the woods here, the Potomac in the city. I say one of the biggest challenges and biggest rewards is, as humans, figuring out how we can live successfully with our nature. I feel this is our most important job. And certainly it's the eye of the needle we need to get through to be successful. Next, there are also bucolic and very special private places we all have. I remember Nancy telling me of some places she used to escape to after, or maybe during high school. And we all have some favorite spots. These are extremely important to us. These are our connections to nature. And they're throughout our community. We all find some special spots. There's 5 million of us. We all have a special spot. Isn't that amazing? Next. So what is clean water? What is dirty water? This is a stark visual example, but it's rarely this easy to see. You have a clean stream, and then you have a stream that's experiencing a lot of sedimentation, a lot of erosion. This is obvious, but normally you can't just look at the water and say, oh, that's clean or that's dirty. Next. But we look at the data. Potomac Conservancy is very data focused, and we rely on science. Every 2 years, we consult with all the science and data sets we know, and we write a Potomac Report card. We grade the river. I have a number of them here, and of course, it's available online at potomacreportcard.org. And some of the data sets look like this. The red, obviously, red trouble. The dark green, really good water quality. The light green, it's fair. And the orange is, it's not so great, but it's not horrible yet. So Potomac Conservancy, with our advocacy work, we work on the areas with red. They need to be brought back to health. That's where our decision-making with laws and investments can be best placed. With our easements protecting land forever, we work on the green and the light green. These are areas where people, a farmer may have 500 acres. Maybe the next generation isn't so interested in farming. What do you do with the family farm? They want to protect it. They want to keep that land healthy. One of the ways to help them do that is through a land easement. And so we take their development rights, their taxes go down, they can stay on the farm, and the farm continues to produce clean water. Next. So I mentioned the Potomac Report card. Every 2 years we grade the river, and we grade a great number of things. Fish, actual water quality with phosphorus, nitrogen, sediment. How many people have fishing licenses? That shows engagement with our river. Public access. How many safe access points do we have that people feel welcome to and people can get to? This is a very important way to monitor how we're doing. In 10 years, we brought the overall grade from a D to a B, and then in 2020, a B minus. So the trajectory is strong. The river is in recovery, which is amazing. But recovery could be faltering and is, threatened. So here we go. We are actually going to do the next report next spring. So it'll be 2023, April, May. And we'll be bringing these numbers together again. And I hope it goes back up to a B. But this is why we work so hard on it. Next. So how does river get dirty? Well, this is a very obvious reason, right? We know how to do this better. You fence off the stream and keep the cows watered elsewhere on the property. Works great. But there are a lot of landowners that need help doing it. Fencing is expensive. Maintaining acres and acres and acres of fence is expensive. We can't, as city people, just expect them to do that. So there are some programs that the federal and state governments allow to help farmers, and we help channel those resources to the people who need them and are wanting to make those changes. Next, stormwater. So agricultural pollution is the biggest problem with the water in the Potomac by volume, but that problem's going down. It's decreasing as farmers get better at managing lands. The only source of water pollution that's still going up is stormwater. everything that falls on our cities, our rooftops, our parking lots, our roads, that water all wants to go downhill. And for every drop of water in this region, downhill is eventually the Potomac River. And it takes everything it can with it, as we know. So next. So there's trash. We don't intend to drop this much trash on the ground, but it happens. And we need to find a better way to manage the trash so that it doesn't end up in our rivers. Next. Sewer overflow pipes. As we know, Alexandria has a bunch of these and is finally tackling that problem. Washington, D.C. started tackling that problem about 8-9 years ago and is well on its way to fixing it. This is not unusual. Every city in the United States with a vintage 1880s sewer system has this problem. We just didn't build them expecting to have this many people and this many hard surfaces. Everyone needs an upgrade. It's super expensive, but it works. And in this region, luckily, we're finally on the way to getting all of our major cities replumbed to improve our water quality. So next. And then, of course, trash affects not only us, it affects wildlife. Everything that falls into the river at this point is pretty much on its way to the Chesapeake Bay and then out to the oceans. So we really do need to get a handle on our trash. Next. And this just breaks my heart, so I had to share it with you. Yeah, animals are actually hurt by our trash. It's not just unsightly. So I know you know that, so I'll get off that topic and on to solutions next. Oh, but before solutions, we have flooding. This is the last part of the challenges the Potomac faces. Like all of our nature, we're trying to restore it, but then climate impacts and the climate crisis are kicking us back a notch. And so now we face kind of a double challenge. We need to keep the Potomac getting healthier and more resilient to the impacts of climate change because it's getting knocked around a lot by the climate. This region, this nature was not evolved to handle this much rain in such a short time. And when we do have that, we get some pretty horrific flooding. And if you frequent Old Town Alexandria, it's even more frequent than that. If you want to talk geology, so there's some interesting complications that our region suffers from. Our region is actually dipping down at the same time that oceans are rising. So our region is experiencing more water rise than elsewhere on the globe. And that's just, we're unlucky. It goes back to glacial era. There used to be a huge weight of ice on the northern United States eastern seaboard. It depressed the northern edge, New York, Vermont, and now it's bouncing back. And we're dipping. It's a long, long, multi-tens, millions of years process, but that's why we're dipping a little bit lower, and we have rising waters. So it's more challenging for us, and we definitely need to tackle these problems. So we like to get vocal and act local. Next, we like to pick up trash. I think at least one of these pictures is Jones Point Park. And one of these pictures,
Cove.
Oh, Fletcher's Cove.
Cove
Yep.
is the middle one. See the one of the traffic? He said traffic cone, it's a traffic barrel.
Yes,
That was fun.
that was fun. It was probably pretty heavy to drag out of the water too, wasn't it?
I was filming, I don't care. Brendan and Marcy.
Thank you.
All you have to do is have a PhD and then you can pull that thing out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You just leverage.
More degrees, the better. Next. And then, of course, our Tomorrow's Trees program is entirely focused on collecting the tree seeds that we need to reforest. We have very strong partnerships with the Virginia Department of Forestry and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. They also have native tree nurseries. And we're working with a suite of about 12 partners to get this supply chain thing solved. Of course, this is what the squirrels don't do. They don't deliver them to the back of the truck and get them planted in nice little pots. That's what humans can do, and we are doing that. This fall will be the first collections again. After COVID, we had to stop all that. And so we'll be doing a series of collections, probably in Arlington Cemetery, but I know other sites are being set up now. Next. And then, of course, protecting land in partnership. This is a picture of Carl Hovermail. He has 4 children classic thing. He's not going to farm his land forever. It's beautiful. It has happy streams, clean water. And his 4 children, really, they live California, Baltimore, New York. They're not coming back to the farm to land, to farm, land to farm. So we worked with Carl and his family to protect that 700 acres. And now someone who maybe couldn't have afforded that with development rights now can afford it. New farmer will be moving in to take care of that land going forward, and it will be less expensive because Potomac Conservancy owns the development rights, and we're never going to develop it. So that's a good solution for protecting land. We also produced a report last year called Rising to the Challenge to try to really understand what are the impacts of climate change here, right here, in our backyards. And if you want to see that, it's online. Next. This is the final bit that you've helped with. So far, we've worked with about 46,000 volunteers. Almost 280,000 pounds of trash have been removed from our waterways. We've planted almost 8,000 native trees. We don't do that planting anymore, but we'll be helping in other ways now. And we continue to help raise money at the state level to hand off to private landowners to do more pollution reduction. And of course, our acres protected are north of 16,000 now. The wildlife is returning. If you don't know, yes, we do have dolphins that come into the Potomac every year, the lower end of the river. Next, they come up to about the 301 Highway Bridge. That's as far north as I speak like a water scientist. Our dolphin research partners at Georgetown University have tracked them as far north as the 301 bridge, but they're routinely seen down towards the mouth of the river because the dolphins come back to the Potomac every spring and summer to have their babies and raise their babies. This is good news. It means we have a lot of good fish, and we have a lot of good fish more than ever because the water's getting cleaner. The cleaner the water, the more the fish, the more dolphins and other creatures we can feed with them. And we're also part of raising your voice and helping good decisions on the local level is helping communities and governments install rain gardens. So we have a lot of surfaces. And when rain falls, it's really great to put it through plants instead of into a pipe. So rain gardens are very helpful with this. Last, people can recreate on healthy, clean water. And that's a joy for everyone in this region, whether you're on trail or on boat or just looking out at the view from a cafe. Clean water makes for a very happy community. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. Questions? Yes.
Like the River Keeper, Potomac River Keeper, and Shenandoah River Keeper, and so on and so forth, as well as Trout Unlimited.
The question is, do we have relationships with other nonprofits like the River Keepers and Trout Unlimited? Yes. It takes a great many different tools in the toolbox to do this kind of work. One of the things the River Keeper Network does really well is pursue lawsuits. They chase down polluters, and they stop pollution, and they make it right. And that's invaluable. We don't do that because we are working with lawmakers and agency professionals who are crafting the laws and the investments for the next 100 years. We do that proactively and in a partnership sense, and they would never sit down with us if they thought we were going to sue them next week. So it's important that these two skills are in different houses, but we do work very closely with our friends at Potomac River Keeper, most recently about trying to turn off the ban on swimming in DC. It's getting clean enough so that we can actually, on many days, healthily and legally swim. Other questions?
And do we have any questions online as well?
Do we have any questions online? How will I know that?
John.
Okay. I have a question, and that's having to do with this kind of quandary between access and pristine, because I just recently read an article about a big forested area in Maryland that they're talking about. The developers wanted, sort of make it more accessible so that they can build hotels outside of the forested areas, but to allow more people. And we have a similar issue here. Some people would really like to have, paths and things to access our woodlands that are part of this property. And the question is that a violation of the rules that we should be following because it's supposed to be preserved land?
Ooh, that is tricky. I'll be interested to know how you resolve that. There's a couple different schools of thought on access to nature. Certainly locking it away from people keeps it safe from some people, but it also keeps it out of sight and out of mind. Having a vibrant community that is self-policing for access, I think, is probably a really helpful way to open up new nature. You're familiar with the broken window syndrome? Everything is fine until someone breaks a window, and if you don't fix that window, it seems like broken windows are okay, and then more windows get broken. And the same thing happens with trash. You would never see someone throw something on the ground unless they see something else on the ground. And then it seems like it's the way to get rid of your trash, and honestly, no one cares anyway, so why bother? But a community that is conscientious about their nature and self-policing and has high expectations by cleaning up trash, putting out trash bins to show that's what you do with it, I think that that can be very healthy in an urban community and still allow people to have access. That's just my philosophy. We don't have an official policy on this.
I was surprised to see that nitrogen and phosphorus got A's when I go sailing an awful lot out on the Chesapeake, and I thought that the algae blooms were products of nitrogen and phosphorus, which would point to there being a lot in the river, right?
They are. Are you sailing in the Chesapeake Bay?
Both.
And in the
I just helped move a boat up from Norfolk to Occoquan, and it was still pretty green. All the nettles get in the water. You can't see more than about 6 inches into the water, and that was all the way up to St. Mary's anyway in the Potomac. Really? Yeah, and I've only been sailing out here for 8 years now, so.
Yeah, we have heard that it is better than it was before. In the Potomac, the nitrogen and phosphorus is getting better because agricultural lands are controlling their off-flow of water and starting to manage cows better. It's nowhere near where it has to be. Again, agricultural pollution is still the biggest source of water pollution problems in the Potomac, but it's getting better, and these grades probably reflect the trajectory. Now, in the Chesapeake, Pennsylvania is having a very hard time, and about 50% of the water in the Chesapeake is coming out of the Susquehanna, thank you. And the algae problem is significant because of uncontrolled agricultural pollution. So hopefully it continues getting better. It also has a lot to do with climate change.
Another question.
Yeah.
I walk around Burke Lake all the time, and I saw some people pulling weeds there, invasive species. Was that you guys, or?
It may have been.
I mean, they brought out bags and bags of, it must have been 20 garbage bags of some, basically weed. Yeah.
I don't know if that was us, but we have done weed removal projects in the past. That's another thing to really, you got to get a hold of it so it doesn't become an enormous problem in the future. So good for them. That's really helpful.
My husband and I are fly fishermen, so we see a lot going on. But recently, and I know that you don't handle this area, we were in West Virginia, basically not very far from Virginia, less than 3 hours. And a place that we have fished many, many years is now showing problems in the water. Color changes. John got some kind of rash in the water and from wading. And so we're concerned that, of course, that's part of the watershed, that might influence the rest, like into Virginia and Maryland, too.
I'd love to know where that was.
That's on the south branch, the north fork of the south branch of the Potomac.
Okay, thank you. I actually do know where that is. There are a lot of influences on water quality, and that sounds like a very bad situation that should be addressed. Hopefully someone's on top of it now. I understand that a lot of water issues in West Virginia are the result of old mines and paper mills. And those are two point source pollution sources that continue to drag us down into poor water quality. Thank you for letting me know. Other questions online?
We don't have any online. Well, one of the things that occurs to me, I guess from a biblical theological perspective, our very purpose as human beings is to take care of nature. I mean, it's in the biblical job description, but I don't think that gets elevated enough. We got the reproduction part down, but we don't have the conservancy part down as well.
Maybe that comes with the next stage of growth. It's a challenge. We at Potomac Conservancy believe that the more you enjoy and are involved in your local nature, the more you come to be a steward of it and feel some responsibility and joy and responsibility for it. You know, why do people go out on a Saturday morning and pick up other people's trash for 2 hours? It's crazy. Why is that fun? It's because we're doing it in a community of people who share our values. And it's a very tangible, rewarding experience to walk into something that's not great and walk away and it's great. And I think the more people who have that kind of reward and community connection to do it, the more we see ourselves as stewards and not just occupiers. I think that's an important mind flip.
So for the time that you've shared with us, what is it you want us to take away from this time together?
Wonderful question. I'd love for you to spread the word, to be involved in conservation work in whatever way brings you joy and reward, and to help others be involved in conservation work. It's one of the ways we help our community to the next generations and beyond. And it can be done in community too, which makes it even more rewarding. So. Oh, come up here.
Yeah, interesting. I think where the trip up is Dominion. The way we look at Dominion is that it's our responsibility that lends itself to stewardship. Other people are like, Dominion, it's mine, and I can do it with it whatever I please. You know, so your interpretation is what's going to determine your actions of, it's mine. The reason that it's mine and I am responsible for its benefit, that it is better for my having been there as opposed to Dominion. So and that's Genesis. You know, and then that's I think that's where folks get tripped up when they say, well, it's, I have dominion over it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this time together. Thank you for your interest.